So when it comes to steering, there's some important considerations. We all learn to push and pull the steering wheel through our hands. And a lot of drivers will still passionately say that the push-pull method is the best. And yet when you talk to motorsports drivers, F1 drivers, and those taking the car out on the track, they tend to keep their hands on the wheel as much as possible, effectively maintaining their grip at a fixed point on the steering wheel, usually Q2 to quarter past positions. So what's correct? What's the best way of steering the car? What are the things that you should look out for? And how do you develop a safe technique yourself? So when it comes to steering, most of us were taught that this round thing in front of us, if you push it to the right, it turns the wheels to the right. And if you push it to the left, it turns the car to the left. But there's actually almost a science behind steering. I'm sure that this is going to prove to be quite a controversial video because a lot of drivers have got very definite opinions when it comes to steering. There's different advocates of the steering methods. We've got the palm steer methods, we've got the push-pull method, and we've got the keep your hands on the wheel all the time as much as possible, even crossing your hands as you do steering maneuvers. So we're going to discuss the merits of each of those. I'm not going to be as dogmatic to say that one is right and one is wrong because they all have their place depending very much on the circumstances that you find yourself in. So the only downside to keeping your hands in a fixed position and crossing them over as you use the steering wheel around town is that your hands are not located near the indicators and the light controls, which can be a problem if you need to indicate and you're making a turn off, for example, which is typical on your UK roundabouts. So it's probably a more track focused technique than it is driving on the road, but it does have merits and some people do seem to prefer this. But generally, both hands on the wheel gives you the maximum amount of control and the less risk of losing control of your car. So one of the things that you really want to avoid is making sudden jerky movements. The whole key when steering a car is to keep it as fluid as possible and to just make sure that you've always got two hands on the wheel. So the push-pull method is very effective when you're parking, moving at low speeds, and also when you're driving at higher speeds. It allows that fine graduated control over the steering. But in a competition and motorsports environment, you really want to have full control of the car. You need to be making very, very precise steering adjustments, maybe going from full lock on the right to full lock on the left to maybe hold a drift or catch the car in a corner. With the motorsports approach to steering, you would keep two hands on the wheel most of the time. And even on the road, just using two hands on the wheel, you can negotiate and make most corners, whatever situation you're in. But if you're doing the push-pull as well, that can make things quite easy to make those graduated steering controls and steering input. So the big habit you want to avoid is palm steering, just using one hand on the wheel. It's very tempting to get into that habit. The problem with palm steering is if your front wheel catches something, there is no way on earth you're going to be able to wrestle the car instantly into full control. So when you're steering on a bend, some drivers like to keep the car going in a straight line as much as possible. So that requires extra movements at sort of apex points. So they will divide a bend, a sweeping bend, into a series of straight points. Now, why do they do that? Well, if they have to brake, a car will stop more effectively in a straight line. So assuming your car has ABS, which most of them do now, that ABS system is going to back off the braking as soon as you start to reach those limits of adhesion. So by keeping the car in straight paths, you can maximize that ability to stop. But the downside of doing that is at those correction points where you effectively steer harder, you're risking going into a skid. That's the point where you're most likely to lose control of the car. Choosing fixed points to straighten out a bend is also a good way of learning to feel the balance of the car in the corners and to get a feel for that essential weight shift that you as a driver are going to be controlling to maximize your control of the car. So there is very much a degree of finesse in that. When you're on a track, steering through corners and apexes is completely different. You really want to be focusing on the maximum exit speed of the corner. And if there are multiple corners or multiple bends, they need to be connected in a very fluid fashion. But the key always in steering on the track and on the roads is to keep things smooth and fluid. It's those jerky movements that can push the car from a point where it has sufficient grip into a point where it's going to start to struggle to get grip and throw you into a skid. So get used to the feel of the car in the corner. When you're cornering, your car weighs a ton, ton and a half, 2 tons, 3 tons. Cars are getting heavier and heavier nowadays. So that's a lot of weight on those 4 points of contact. So as you turn right, the weight is going onto the left side of the car. If you turn left, the weight is going onto the right hand side of the car. So when you're driving along, get a feel for the weight of the car and the handling. If you can try and balance that with a trailing throttle when you're going around a corner, it stops all the weight going onto that front wheel or onto the back wheel. So both outside wheels are loaded up equally when it comes to weight distribution. So you're less likely to skid, lose traction or lose control. So I hope that's been useful to you. Please boot that like button. We've got more on driving coming soon. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. We'd love you to stay tuned to all the tips that we've got coming out. And I've lined this video up for you that you should find really interesting. Thanks for watching. See you in this next video.